Today we're going to be talking about breach management. My name's Caroline Carver and I'm a Principal Consultant at Three Black Cats. We are going to be recording today's meeting and we'll make it available online. We're just literally recording the screen and my voice. Anything you put in the chat, etc., is not there and your presence isn't there. If you have questions as we go along, feel free to pop them in the Q&A and we will try and answer them as we go. All right. Perfect. So before we can kick off with breach management, we need to talk about what is a privacy breach. And this sounds really simple, right? But the number of things that either don't get reported as a privacy breach or do get reported as a privacy breach that maybe aren't is quite high. So quite commonly we see things that get reported as a security breach, but there isn't that link up that says, oh yes, indeed it is a security incident, but actually it's also a privacy incident. So let's first explore what is a privacy breach. So a privacy breach, as defined in the Privacy Act, is personal information where personal information is inappropriately disclosed, altered, lost, or accessed. Now, I've used the words inappropriately because it could be malicious. It could be an outside hacker, for example, who does this. Or it could be one of your own staff who is there using it inappropriately, but has full authority to be there. So, for example, staff browsing, where a staff member is looking at somebody's account, maybe a famous person. Because of their job, they have access to that account. So maybe they work in the call center, but the person hasn't called. Famous person hasn't called, and they're just checking out their account because they can. Okay, that would be under privacy breach. It's inappropriate to be looking at it at that time. It wasn't unauthorized, it was just inappropriate to be looking at it. The other piece to a privacy breach, though, is also something that happens in your organization which stops people from being able to access the information either on a temporary or permanent basis. Now, we're not talking about a 3-minute outage. We are talking about, okay, we actually can't find it. It went up in a fire if it was paper records. Our system corrupted and has been offline for like a week. That kind of level of cannot access. And that's one of the quite commonly missed ones because people think, oh, cool, it's really secure. Yep, nobody's accessing it, including the people who want to have access or need to have access. So if we think about the Waikato DHB incident that we had quite a few years ago now, a large amount of that data became unavailable. Okay, as a result, people couldn't get some of their healthcare. Their records weren't available in some cases. They went to paper. Okay, huge impact to them. Therefore, a privacy breach. So when we think about privacy breaches, we need to think about all of those different lenses and making sure we bring them to the party. So when do they occur? So the Privacy Commissioner, OPC, commissioned a report back in 2021. Unfortunately, they don't appear to have done it since. Now, this was based only on what was reported to the Privacy Commissioner, but it's pretty consistent with what I see across other businesses. So of the privacy breaches we have, about 61% of them are caused by human error. Now, the most common privacy breach, sadly, we still see is, oops, that email, I put the wrong attachment on, or, oops, I sent it to the wrong person or persons. We also still have issues around the to field being everyone and the CC field being everyone versus the BCC field being private. Don't let anyone else see who's received this email. Those sort of incidents can cause privacy breaches, depends what you are writing to people about. But those sort of incidents are your most common. In terms of breaches, most of them are not mass wide scale, impacting many, many people at a time. So most things reported are single incidents, one customer, two customer, one staff member. They're not, oh my God, I lost my whole database. How on earth did that happen? Okay. We still do have malicious attacks. So this is our hacker who is coming to try and break into our system to steal our data. We've had recent ones of those in Australia. We've had things here in New Zealand, very similar to that. We think about the Reserve Bank, again, malicious attacker coming in that case. We then have a degree of theft of information. So this can be theft as in electronic theft. So disgruntled staff member takes off with whole copy of your customer database. Sadly happens more than you would think. Or it can be things like theft of devices, theft of notebooks, etc. System faults, so misconfigured systems that send emails usually to the wrong person. They send it to the emergency contact versus the account holder because they were misconfigured, or they make stuff available to everyone to see when it should only be the person whose record it is who can see it. Those kind of system faults. And then we have a random selection of other things that happen. Okay. But it's really important when we consider your breach process to consider that range of scenarios that we need to cater for, because it needs to be suitable to cater to that one person, one incident, up to mass scale. Oh my God, where have all my records gone? And it needs to be able to scale for that. So thinking about how our breach process works. So our breach process tends to have 5 stages to it. First one is identifying the breach. Now, this sounds super simple, right? How can we not know when a breach happens? You'd be surprised. A lot of this comes down to how we communicate with our staff into being able to identify what a privacy breach is. So a lot of people are like, I sent an incorrect email. Oh, yeah. Oh, that was embarrassing. I should recall it. But they don't think about the consequences of, oh, yep, there was a person behind this. This was a privacy breach for that person. Equally, we quite often see that the staff member has told their manager, but their manager doesn't know what to do next, so hasn't done anything about it other than note it down somewhere. So quite often that privacy breach doesn't get to the privacy officer to know about as a privacy breach. Now, this is going to become important when we talk about notifiable privacy breaches. And the reason for this is your organization is deemed to know about it once somebody in your organization knows it's happened. So the clock starts at that point, not when the privacy officer's told, but when somebody in your organization knows it's happened. So if that staff member realized, oops, I missent that email, I've just attached the wrong person's file to it, and it never comes to light, or it comes to light 3 months later, your clock is already 3 months over before it's even started. The other place we see breach identification come up is through vendors. So most of us can't run our organization as an island. We rely heavily on vendors. And vendors are subject to issues in the same way our own organization is. So if our vendor is hosting data for us, so if we think of an example that happened, PageUp. So PageUp is a survey tool, okay? PageUp had a massive breach due to security issues a year or so ago now. And as a result, those organizations who were using it to host data on their behalf ended up with a privacy breach. Because as we talked about yesterday, the data that your vendors holds is in effect you holding that data. So if your vendor has a privacy breach, that is your privacy breach still. So when we think about our vendors, we need to think about how do we make sure they notify us? Them identifying a breach is great. How do they tell us? So quite often we will write into the contract, if you have a breach, you need to tell us within 48 hours or 24 hours, but we don't tell them how. So then they're like, got a breach, don't know what to do. Oh, I'll tell the account manager, who then just doesn't know what to do, and it goes into a black hole. Alternatively, some systems have an ability to configure the details for your privacy officer into them. So for example, Microsoft, and that way the alerts will get sent direct to your privacy officer. But you need to think about how do you funnel those into your organization and get them to the correct place. So once we have got our stuff to usually our privacy officer is the person who gets the details of this breach. So we then need to think about what are we going to do next? So we're going to need to think about, cool, what information is involved? Is it even personal? I get lots of privacy breaches reported through my various roles where it's about a business, a company. So not personal information, or it actually wasn't a breach, working as designed, working as per the privacy statement, for example. So we need to think about what personal information was involved and what happened. And we should write that down. And the reason we write it down is so that when we come back and we get questions on how we got ourselves to a certain point, we've got those records. It's going to be potentially a high stress situation. So making sure we've got that clear, documented thought process is really important. Because thinking might change as you go along. So you might be like, oh, yeah, cool, small breach, one person, but I need to do a bit more investigating, and then find your one person's now 50,000 people. You might need to shift your thinking, but you need to have written down at this point, we made this decision, we found this answer, therefore we have changed our tack. So it's like a kind of running commentary of where we're up to. So we've identified it is definitely a privacy breach, and we need to move on from there. At this point, we might also engage other teams. So this is the point we might be like, oh, yep, okay, it is a privacy breach, but actually it's also a security breach. Perfect. I should get my colleagues in from security. We'll work together on it. Or actually, this is a fraud. Cool. We'll get our fraud team involved as well. Or it might be all three of us. Really important, though, we stick together and we have one effort and we're all moving in the same direction. Nothing more annoying as a customer to have 3 different stories provided by 3 different teams to me. So we need to all be on that same page. This is also the point where you might need to, depending on your process, flag up to senior management. Hey, we've got this going on. We're going to kick in our process. So here's the most important step. We need to contain it. So by contain it, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to make it good. What we are going to do, though, is make it so that it doesn't get any worse. Okay, we can't undo sometimes what we've already done, but we can stop it spreading. So, for example, if we have misconfigured a system and it is giving everyone access to everyone else's records, as part of our containing it, we might turn it off. Might be like, oh, geez, oh dear. Okay, we will put up our under maintenance screen on our internet banking, and we will take it offline while we work it out. If it's an email thing, if it's internally sent, we can recall it. Now, worth saying, if it's externally sent, recalling an email doesn't usually work. So if you sent it outside of your company, recalling it doesn't generally work. So you might need to contact the person. Go, hey, we sent you an email in error. Can you please delete it and confirm to us you have done this? If we've had someone who's lost their laptop, we're coming up for that time of the year. Christmas time is great for this sort of problem. We have our Christmas brain on. we go traveling and we take our work laptop and our cell phone with us, and we leave them in the hotel, airport, back of the seat on the airplane, you name it. People leave their device there. So in that case, we might be like, okay, don't know who's got it, but I'm sure it's not good. We should wipe the device, meaning that somebody can't get access to it, even if they want to. So the data's gone. You're welcome to look at it. It's now just a brick. If it's something like someone is getting into another user's account and they shouldn't be, maybe we want to change the password. Maybe we want to temporarily lock that account so nobody can log in, legit customer or fraudulent customer. And also we might want to think about if it's being caused by our staff. Do we want to remove certain access from our staff? Do we want to stand our staff member off the shop floor at the moment, etc.? Maybe we need to take them off. We need to retrain them. Maybe they're on the contact center and they're being a bit oversharey. Maybe we want to put them onto simple calls while we retrain them. Okay, stop it getting worse. But the key thing we are looking for at this point is to stop it getting worse. And we're looking from the perspective of the impacted party. Okay, and that's what it's saying. Through this whole breach, we need to put ourselves in the customer or staff members' shoes if it's about staff members, and we're looking at stuff from their perspective. There's absolutely an overlay on this about brand reputation, how we're going to recover from this, etc. And that is important, but it's not the first and foremost we're looking for. We're looking to protect our customers or impacted people to the best of our ability. We can deal with our brand and reputation afterwards. So we've got our situation semi under control. We know it's not getting any worse. Now where to from here? So at this point, we then need to consider assessing what has happened. So we've stopped it carrying on, and we can now look at the facts of what has gone on. So at this point, we need to actually do a bit of a forensic deep dive into what has happened. So say it's that email that has gone to the wrong person. Cool. Who was it meant to go to? Who did it go to? And what was in that email? Does it have an attachment, for example? Because if it is an email that says, thank you for your letter, we've received it. Okay. Unless you're some agencies, most probably not much harm has come to the person who received that error. They're like, weird, no biggie. Particularly as they don't know who it was directed to in the first place, other than most probably not them. However, if it is, hey, please find attached a copy of your mortgage application and withdrawal form for your KiwiSaver hardship, and oh yeah, would you like to talk to us about foreclosure on your property, with all the correct customer's personal information, that is so different. And that's really important to say. Context is everything here. It is about who, what, and who is it gone to particularly. And when we think about that, we also need to think about how easy is it to access. So if we think about our email example, if I have sent all that super interesting stuff that I talked about to the wrong person, but I encrypted it with a password and they don't have the password, well, now they've just got an email with a file they can't open on it. Most probably the risk profile of that is significantly less than if they're able to open it and access it. Okay, so we need to think about that one. But we also need particularly to think about what we know about the impacted party. So if we think about a one-on-one person situation, right? You have sent inadvertently by accident an email to my husband instead of me, and it contains details about my name, postal address, and home address. And that's it. And it says, oh no, thank you for your letter. Okay. Likelihood is my husband knows where we live. harm coming to me as an individual, pretty low. Same email has gone to someone who has just escaped from domestic violence, has literally just changed their address with you, and is living in a safe house through Shine at the moment. Impact to that individual is huge. They're most likely might have to move. Their ex might actually show up, cause more violence, etc. So we do really need to think about, on a per person basis, what does it mean to that customer? And that's in context of what do we know about them? So for some of you, you won't know that this customer is going through a divorce, maybe. But in other organizations, you will have detailed notes on file that says, customers going through a divorce, they've asked to change their details, they've asked for it to be kept really secure, they're worried about ABC, etc. So you need to have a think about what you have about that individual to be able to make that determination for them about what the level of risk is. And that will mean some work, right? One person impacted, quite easy. 50 people impacted, oof, that's a bit harder. We might need to group them up and think about, okay, are there high risk customers in here versus some lower risk ones? Are there things like children, VIPs, those customers with vulnerability flags, etc., on them, that we need to consider their circumstances differently? So at this point, we've sort of formed a view on what is that risk factor to these individuals. And that is what then brings us on to notifiable privacy breaches. So the Privacy Act doesn't require that we notify people of every breach, and that's a common misconception. You are welcome to notify people about everything that happens. In fact, some organizations choose to, because it actually builds trust and transparency. Some other countries require that you notify about every single thing that happens. New Zealand's not like that. So in New Zealand, we have a concept of serious harm, and we have what's called a notifiable privacy breach. So this is a breach that's happened that we have a reason to believe has caused serious harm to an individual or is likely to do so. So this is when we have to put that customer hat on to go, cool, what is the impact to that individual and how serious is it? Okay. Some key things we need to consider here in the definition: reasonable to believe. Okay, so a lot of organizations say that's more like a 50-50 chance for it to be occurring or not. Okay, it's not standing on one leg when there's a blue moon, could happen, maybe, maybe not. It's much easier to prove when it has happened. You know it's happened. Quite often the customer's rung you, emailed you, quite upset about it. It's really easy to see. But that likely to happen, you're going to have to make a quantitative decision about what is that chance of it happening. So what do we need to consider for this one? So when we think about serious harm, we need to think about what information is involved. Now, this isn't a definitive list. This will be context-based as well. But you can pretty much say if it's likely to be sensitive personal information. Now, that's not something we have defined in the New Zealand Privacy Act like other countries, but we all have a bit of an understanding of what that might be. So, for example, if it's your health information, yeah, pretty much likely might be serious harm coming here. If it is highly sensitive about your financial situation, so it's about, as I was saying earlier, your house is about to foreclose. Yep, that's quite sensitive. It's not something I want everyone else around here to know, etc. So think about that in that context. How would people feel if someone knew this about them? Is it something they would share only with their nearest and dearest, if at all? Or is it actually something they'd be happy to go to a party and tell people about? Okay, that will give you that scale of how sensitive is it. And then we need to follow that through and say, right, what harm is going to come to people? Now, harm is a hard one. And it's got a range of elements to it. So we might have harm. Yep, my angry ex is on my doorstep. He's bashing it down or he's hit me. Yep, that's clearly harm. They have stolen thousands of dollars from me. Yep, definitely harm there. I feel upset. Now, this one's much harder. Okay. How do we quantify that as serious harm? Most of these customers are going to feel somewhat upset. But to be harmed, we're talking about sort of psychological harm. I feel suicidal. My life is ending. I cannot go outside. I feel like I'm going to have to be a social recluse. I can't face my work colleagues anymore. That kind of level of emotional harm. I've gone to the GP. I'm on antidepressants, etc. Now that harm is really hard to quantify. So you will need to lean into what you know about that customer. Now, some of these customers will write to you and say, hey, oh my God, that breach you told me about had this impact, that impact on me. So you might need to change your thinking on it. Other people might be like, actually, I don't care. Thank you for telling me I don't care. Okay. So maybe look at what has the customer communicated with you, particularly if they've notified you of this breach. Will usually be quite a good commentary on what has happened and how do they feel about it. Okay. And what it's saying, you can change your decision on serious harm as you move through this process. So you might originally be like, yep, I think it's there. And actually, when we work through it, we realize there's other controls in place. Actually, no, it's not going to happen anymore. Or when I work through something for a particular customer, I've realized their set of circumstances means that actually this is hugely impactful for them on it. So we then think about what measures have we taken already? Okay, so what security measures were already in place? Okay, so that highly sensitive mortgage file has gone, but it's got a password on it and they don't have the password. Cool, would be hugely harmful if someone was able to get into it, but they can't. Therefore, the chance of harm is the square root of NAFL. Okay. If we also, though, sent a password in the email before it or in the email attached with the attachment, different story. We also then need to think about what steps did we take to contain it, right? So say it was that email and we had only sent it internally with all that information and we managed to recall it and it said nobody had read it. Okay. Even if it didn't have a password on, we recalled it with evidence no one had read it. Right. So what harms actually come to that person? Pretty much none. Equally, if it's gone externally, right, we sent it to a lawyer or a trusted professional who came back to us, confirmed they had deleted it. Most probably we could be comfortable that no harm would come to it. We send it to a random member of the public who doesn't know this person. Again, question, are we happy with that? Depends what's in it, right? If we sent it to an estranged family member, though, likelihood that harm is coming right up on it. Even if they said that they had deleted it, are we sure? Are we really sure? Are we comfortable it actually happened? We need to make that determination. So we have considered all our factors and we've realized that we're going to have a breach and it's going to have 4 people involved. Of our 4 people involved, it is likely serious harm for one of those people, right? There's one person who we know is escaping domestic violence. Okay, right, we need to do something about that one person. So we have determined it is notifiable privacy breach and we move along. So what do we need to do next? We need to notify the Privacy Commissioner through Notify Us. So Notify Us is an online portal. it's a really good way of testing your analysis as well. So when you fill it in, you can fill it in right up and it sort of goes through like a testing with you and goes, yep, do I think this is serious harm? Maybe, maybe not. And then you can submit it and say, yep, I want to report this. It's a good tester for you to work out or help you work out if it could be serious harm. If it is serious harm, Commissioner requires that you notify them without undue delay. Now, in the legislation, it doesn't say how many hours. However, the Commissioner has issued guidance that he expects that to occur within about 72 hours. Okay, that's 72 hours from when your organisation knew about it. It's not when the privacy officer knew about it, when your organisation knew about it. So we come back to that earlier piece about it being really important that that message from the front line gets to your privacy officer quickly, or from your vendor to you quickly. Because if not, your 72 hours has been chunked away already. Okay. And then the most important part, the Privacy Commissioner is important, but it's just one part to it. The other piece we need to do is tell impacted individuals about it. Now, there are a few exceptions to this, not many. Before you ask, there is not an exception for, oh my God, we're super embarrassed. I wish it hadn't happened. Okay, that is not one of the exceptions. The exceptions are things like if we tell them we are going to notify them about or prejudice an investigation into a crime, or on our interest, we believe that notifying them will make them suicidal even more maybe than they already are. Okay. If the customer, however, has told you themselves about the privacy breach, your arguments for not telling them about it afterwards become really, really limited because they've already told you. They already know it's happened. So some of those exceptions most probably can't be relied on. So we need to formally contact them. We need to write to them. Now, when we say write, we could send them a letter. We've kind of gone away from letters now. More likely, we're going to email them. We might attach a letter, but we're going to need to write to them in some written form. The reason it needs to be in written form is so that they can consider it, go back to it, think about it, review it again. Okay, so we need to tell them in that, and the legislation sets out what we have to tell them at a minimum. You can tell them more, but at a minimum, we need to tell them what happened. In English, not techo speak, not our best legal, plain language so that people can understand what happened. And the important part there is, and this means what to you? Okay, so if we think about that email, we sent an email to an incorrect person. We have belief that the person is known to you. Or we sent an email to the incorrect person. They were a trusted professional. We managed to recall it. Okay. We need to tell them what steps we've taken. So we tried to recall the email, we've called them, they've confirmed it's deleted, etc. Maybe we've frozen your account. We need you to contact us or come to our store to reset your account. And then we need to tell them what they can do. So this is about, we suggest you do the following. So we might say, we suggest you monitor your account activity for the next little while. We suggest that you change your passwords in other systems if you've used the same password for multiple systems, because although we tell people not to do it, people will. Those sort of things. We recommend that you speak to domestic violence, etc. And you can point them to agencies who can help them. So some common ones we see people pointed to: NetSafe, CERT, which is a security group within government. There is a company that you can pay to provide support for people in terms of breaches as well. So you might issue something like that. You might also, at that point, wish to make some sort of offer to them as an apology. Okay. It's an apology. It's not a bribe. So just watch how you word it and how it comes across. So it might be, hey, we've realized that we've put you in a bad financial situation. Here is an apology payment. We have compromised your account. We are going to give you free credit reporting, enhanced credit reporting for the next 12 months. Or actually, we've compromised your passport. We have arranged with passports for you to have a free passport reprint. So it's got a new number. Here is how you go about getting that. Okay, so this is your offer to them. So here's how we can help you. As part of that communication, we also need to tell them that we have notified the Privacy Commissioner. You don't need to give the case number, just that you have done it. Usually we say what date we did it on. And that they have the right to complain to the Privacy Commissioner individually if they want as well, if they wish to take it up with the Commissioner. We also need to provide the contact details for someone they can speak to about this. So generally, we try and make that a person, not the contact center. And that's because you are trying to be sorry here, and they will want a person-to-person communication. So thinking about how do we channel those, who do they want to speak to, who's most appropriate for this individual. Now, sometimes that'll be the privacy officer. Sometimes it might be like an account manager, relationship manager, something like that for them. It might be a special care team in your contact center, etc. Be very dependent on what is appropriate for you at the time. Now, you're going to send this off to these people. Some of them will write back to you. Some of them will not be happy. Some of them will just ignore it. If it is serious, though, you might also wish to ring these people, because the reason you are communicating with them is so that they can take steps to protect their privacy. So if it is important they do something quite urgently, or we need to get the message to them urgently, we most probably should ring them as well. So if I think of an example, we have frozen your bank account to protect you. Sending me a letter is lovely, but most probably I want to know that before I fill my entire shopping trolley up with groceries and stand at the checkout and can't pay. I will be even more upset about it at that point than I would have been if you had just called me and gone, look, this has happened. It's awful, but it's happened. And here is what we're doing about it now. Hey, don't go shopping for half an hour. We might have it sorted, etc. And how your organization comes out of this reputationally very much depends on how you handle this comms and how you handle this aftercare. People generally don't remember the breach as such, but they remember what your organization did afterwards. Now, be very careful about wording in this. How to upset people big time. We apologize for this incident. It will never happen again. Cool. That's great. Love your promise. A week later, when it happens again to the same person due to a different set of circumstances, you look like an idiot when you write back to them. So it's more about thinking about your language and going, we've taken steps to mitigate the chance of this happening again, etc., rather than a rock solid promise that it's never going to happen again that you just can't keep. Okay, so thinking about how we do that communication. Privacy Commissioner may ask you for a copy of that letter after you do it. So we're saying, what happens to that stuff when you put it in for the Privacy Commissioner? So Privacy Commissioner, when you put it in, you will get an email back with a notification number. Okay, that is your case number. If things change in terms of how people react, the circumstances have changed, you've got more facts, you can go back in and update your notification to the Privacy Commissioner. Once that notification is in, someone in the Privacy Commissioner's team will look at it. That is usually not instantaneous. That might be quite a while later sometimes, like a couple of weeks later. So you need to not be waiting for the Privacy Commissioner to tell you what to do. You need to be there proactively managing this breach with your customers The commissioner is there to provide support to you, but at the end of the day, it's your organisation. So when the commissioner's team writes you, they might ask you some follow-up questions. So they might ask for more details about what has happened. They might ask for the timeline. They might ask for evidence about why you think it's serious harm or not. And then they will confirm back to you if they believe it is serious harm or not. If you have said that you have not notified individuals for one of the exceptions, they might ask questions about, is that exception valid? And when is that notification going to happen? Okay, because a lot of those notification exceptions are delays. So we can delay the notification if we need for certain reasons, but we still got to do it eventually. Okay. So we might be, for example, if we've got to write to our whole customer base, we're maybe not going to send everyone's notification today, because then everyone's going to call the contact center. So we might say, actually, over the next week, we're going to send our notifications and we're going to stagger them, and we're going to start with our most vulnerable customers first. Or we're going to start with A and go to Z, however we want to do it. At any time, though, when we're notifying customers, this is the point to consider. Are they going to go to the media, etc.? So this is usually when you want to loop in your comms team, etc. And think about how your letter plays out in the Dom Post, the Herald, etc. Make sure you've got the tone right for it. Sorry. So how do we do effective breach management? So first and foremost, in order for us to be effective, we need to have a plan. It needs to be written down for people. Quite often we will also do training on our plan. So we might actually test drive it. So rather than waiting for us to have a breach, we might simulate a breach in our organization. So we might actually go, hey, look, we've been hacked. Let's practice. So like kind of let's pretend. Let's practice, make sure all our process works, make sure we know who's telling the commissioner, make sure we know what we're going to say, who's going to sign it off, etc. I would really recommend doing that, because you will find the first time you have to use your notifiable privacy breach process in anger, there's usually at least one issue with how you've written it down. Now, the level of writing that process down will depend on your organization, right? If you've got 2 people, 3 people in your organization, the process might be tell the privacy officer, which you are required to have one, and they will then look at the Privacy Commissioner's website and work out what to do next. That might be well appropriate for your organization. However, if you are more like a large bank, you might have a really detailed process stepped out with roles and responsibilities the whole way through. Bear in mind, though, that process has to be used in anger at times of stress. So if you have written something so goddamn complicated that nobody can follow it, even when they're not under stress, the chance of them going wrong on it under stress is quite high. So do think about when it would be used. We then need to roll that process out through our business. Now, most of our staff won't need to know how to deal with a privacy breach once the privacy officer knows about it, because actually it's not going to be their job. The important piece we need to communicate to them is, how do you identify one? So what is one? And how are you going to get that message to the privacy officer? Okay. So Privacy Week gives a great opportunity to train in that. So quite often some organizations run quizzes. Can you spot the privacy breach? So, conversation starter, these sort of things happen in our organization. Which of these is a privacy breach? Maybe it's built into a Privacy 101 training module for your organization. Maybe it's just ongoing that we send a quarterly update. Hey, we've had these kind of breaches in our organization. Be aware, think about how this impacts your day job. Okay. And last but not least, it's really important to learn from our previous breaches. Okay. Accidents happen, but where it becomes a problem is when we haven't learned. So if we take staff browsing as a prime example, we caught someone staff browsing, the impact was huge, we had to notify about it, and then we just filed it and went, yeah, okay, cool, no further action. Likelihood is that staff browsing is going to happen again. So we need to think about what can we do to improve our culture? What controls can we build in, maybe that we don't already have, to stop this happening? Equally, if we think about our BCC email that every organisation usually does at least once a year by accident, maybe our learnings is we do send that email to people and just remind them. Maybe we want to turn the mail tips on in Outlook. And if you put too many people in the CC field that are external, it pops up a thing going, looks like you're sending a mass mailing. How about you use the BCC fields? Okay, so little things like that are really important that we do learn from them so we don't keep repeating the same mistake time and time again. And that's what I'm saying. The Privacy Commissioner is looking for you to learn. Okay, accidents happen. They are looking for you to learn and improve on it and learn from others as well. So, keeping an eye on what they're talking about, what guidance they're putting out, etc., is really important to know what other people have done as well. Okay, so over to you guys for any questions.